Well, it is Friday, which is marginally acceptable. We are glad you were spending part of it with CNN Student News. I'm Carl Azuz. We begin in Pakistan, where government forces are being deployed against the advance of the Taliban. As we reported yesterday, the militant group is trying to expand its reach from the Swat Valley into Bunair district. The government says that violates a deal it made with the Taliban. Yesterday, a van carrying Pakistani troops in the region came under attack. One police official was killed, another one was wounded. The military says these troops are being sent to Bunair to protect civilians and property. The Taliban says it's there to impose Sharia or Islamic law, and its members won't disturb courts, schools, or hospitals. As Ivan Watson reports, a greater concern is that this advance will reach Pakistan's capital.
News of the Taliban advance spreading fear in the Pakistani capital. This newspaper vendor repeats a somewhat misleading headline. The Taliban has entered Islamabad. That's not exactly true yet. But residents here are getting worried.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous for Islamabad because they are coming to attack on Islamabad.
The Taliban spreading too fast.
Lawmaker Haider Abbas Rizvi says the Pakistani government has to act fast.
There's just one city between Taliban's and Islamabad, and that's the city of Haripur. And Haripur starts right after these mountains.
Taliban fighters emerged from their stronghold in Pakistan's Swat Valley this week, taking control of Bunair, just 60 miles from the Pakistani capital. Local Pakistani officials say the Taliban are also armed and operating in the districts of Shangla and Upper Dir in violation of a peace agreement signed by the Pakistani government last week. So far, the federal government is standing by that agreement.
Agreement is a local solution to a local problem, and we do believe that its implementation would bring peace and stability to that region.
But families have started to flee Bunair, fearful of what's to come. Shops are closed, market streets deserted, the police stations and courthouses in this alpine region locked shut. The Taliban say they want to impose their strict version of Islamic Sharia law across Bunair and the rest of Pakistan. The Taliban have issued a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the Pakistani state. The U.S. government, the Pakistani media, and some Pakistani politicians are sounding the alarm about this growing and approaching threat. But from the Pakistani government, there is little sense of urgency. Ivan Watson, CNN, Islamabad.
Well, they say the waiting is the hardest part, but that's what South Africa is doing as results of Wednesday's presidential election are tallied. In the U.S., you know it, outcomes are announced really quickly. And in South Africa, which has 23 million registered voters, all the counting is done by hand. And Nkeple Mabuse explains what the results might mean for the future of South African politics.
The focus of the South African election has moved away from polling stations to this election nerve center in the capital city, Pretoria. Now, this is where all the results from polling stations from around the country are being captured and then posted on these big screens for all to see. Now, of course, the three main political parties that everybody's keeping their eyes on are the ruling ANC. Will they be able to maintain their 2/3 parliamentary majority? And the other two main parties, they're opposition parties, the Democratic Alliance, which is the official opposition in South Africa, and then COPE, a party that broke away from the ANC just a few months ago. These elections have been described as the most important and most exciting elections since democracy in 1994. It's very difficult to tell when official results will be released, but it's expected that it may be as early as Saturday. Nkeple Mabuse, CNN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Now that means we don't have the results for you today, but if you want to check them out when they do come in, head over to CNN.com on the weekend.
Today's shout out goes out to Mr. Bain's government classes at Union City High School in Union City, Michigan. In what decade was the first universal credit card introduced? You know what to do. Was it the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, or the 1950s? You've got 3 seconds. Go! Individual companies offered credit cards in the 1920s. but the universal cards that could be used all over came out in the 1950s. That's your answer, and that's your shout out.
President Obama says that credit cards are an important convenience, and he wants to protect consumers from some of the problems that can sometimes come with them. Yesterday, he met with executives from credit card companies to discuss the issue. Congress is considering legislation that would clamp down on rates and fees. Credit card representatives have concerns, though, especially because the proposed laws would prevent the companies from reacting to risky behavior from card users. Well, the economic crisis is probably the biggest issue that President Obama has taken on during his first 100 days in office. But it's not the only one. The 100-day milestone is coming up next week, and it's time for a report card. We want you to head to our blog and grade the president on his first 100 days.
Here's the deal. Today's money word is currency. Currency includes coins and paper that are issued by the government and can be traded for goods and services. Essentially, it's the physical representation of money. Put that in your word bank.
Food, clothes, gas, just about everything requires money. But where can you get it when times are tight? Since money doesn't grow on trees, at least that's what your mother told you, maybe you could create your own currency. That is what some towns are doing in an attempt to energize the local economy. Brooke Baldwin cashes in the details.
In the wake of the economic downturn, local communities have taken note, not this kind of note, rather their own note by printing local currency. In Pittsboro, North Carolina, they call it the Plenty.
We're all struggling, right? And so the idea is to build ourselves back up, and the Plenty allows us to do that.
Melissa Fry is behind this new push in Pittsboro to relaunch the Plenty, a once defunct local currency that come May 12th will be backed by this bank.
You can take 9 federal dollars, go into Capital Bank, and exchange it for 10 Plenties. So you're actually essentially getting a 10% discount on your local purchases by doing that.
The point, spend locally. The perk, get a discount. Already a handful of businesses accept the Plenty, including Chatham Marketplace. Mary DeMar says much of the motivation is psychological.
You can spend locally all you want with U.S. currency, but once you turn them into Plenties, you're saying, you know, I'm keeping this money right here.
That's a message reminiscent of the Great Depression. Banks were closing, cash was short, so local governments issued scrip to keep commerce flowing. Currently, about a dozen communities use local currency. One of the oldest is Ithaca Hours, which went into circulation in 1991. The largest system is in Massachusetts, where about 350 businesses accept Berkshires. And in Detroit, 3 business owners are now accepting the Cheer.
This concept of community currency is perfectly legal, according to the federal government, just as long as this doesn't resemble this. You still pay taxes to Uncle Sam just the same. But one economist says this idea doesn't add up.
If people want to stimulate the local economy by spending locally, they can do it with dollars just as well as anything else.
Edward Van Wessup is an assistant finance professor at the University of North Carolina.
The idea of keeping money in the community doesn't actually make a lot of sense. You don't want to keep money in the community. You want to trade with other communities. That's what makes everybody wealthy.
Perhaps in Pittsboro and elsewhere, it's less about getting rich and more about a commitment to the community. Brooke Baldwin, CNN, Pittsboro, North Carolina.
Well, in keeping with the currency theme here, some clothes can cost you a pretty penny. This one will run you about 10 million of them. It is the world's most expensive suit. Price tag, around $100,000. It's made from gold and platinum threads, rare silks and wool, and of course diamond buttons in gold settings. Although the tie isn't included, so you'll need to save up for that. Hands off, Mr. Reporter, the suit is fit for a king. And it offers a tailor-made ending to today's show. We hope that pun was suitable. Check out the official CNN Student News Facebook page over the weekend. We got a new video up for you, and we will see you again on Monday.